Thank you. What brings me to COP11 was an event that we actually held yesterday, which brought together spiritual leaders, academia, NGOs, and hosted actually by the Secretariat of the CBD to talk about sacred natural sites, pilgrimage routes, and the sacred dimension of biodiversity, and really to raise awareness amongst the people who come to this event of the importance of the spiritual dimension of nature.
Um, Diverse Earth is your organization. Tell us what the mission is and what kind of activities do you take up?
Our mission is to protect, manage, and restore sacred natural places, so places around the world that are of high biodiversity, but also of cultural diversity and spiritual diversity. And so our mission is to work at these places, to support the custodians of these places, and also working in a slightly different way than conservation organizations normally do. We're taking a cultural conservation approach, which means approaching conservation culturally and spiritually.
This is interesting. So, if you work with different governments, do you not face challenge of um, winning their confidence? Because talking about religious and sacred principles, they may not agree with what you're saying.
It is a challenge. It depends on the context. It depends on the country. Some countries are very willing to and have empathy with this type of thing. Of course, it's quite controversial. Also, if you're working in a country that has multiple faith groups and but of course, this working at this interface between culture, nature, and spirit is a wonderful way to have interfaith dialogue and make sure that governments are involved in this. And so normally it's relatively easy to to start dialogue and to start working in countries.
But in a world where people like to buy logics and rationale and scientific arguments, um, did you have to face allegations on spreading, superstitious beliefs?
We haven't had those allegations so far, and hopefully we won't have to face them. But it's very true that in a setting such as this, where many scientists and biologists come together at these places, and there is a lack of understanding of issues that are less tangible. And issues of the spirit are, of course, one of these less tangible issues. But I think there is a growing acceptance amongst the bigger NGOs and among, at the convention itself. And of course, you've seen all of the indigenous peoples and the local communities that have a voice here. And so these issues are really taking hold.
Um, it would be great if we talk about some success stories. So tell us about some success stories of how sacred principles have led to conservation and expansion.
Let me first say that when a place is sacred, it can go in two ways. In many places in the world, because a place is sacred, it is better protected, often even better protected than state protected areas because of its sacred value. On the other hand, and you see this quite often in India, for example, because a place is sacred, it actually suffers increased pressure. Because, of course, if you think about, your big pilgrimage sites in India, where millions of people can often come to that particular place, often there's an increased pressure. So either way, whether it's a good case scenario or a difficult case scenario, there is a lot of work to be done. And so you see many examples of where a place is sacred, it's the only remnant of that forest left. For example, the Kaya forest in Kenya, or many of the sacred groves in India are the same story. also see the case where there are sacred species. You know, we've recently been in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and because the bonobo, the chimpanzee, is believed to be ancestors, they don't eat them. And so you can see many wonderful examples of sacredness really enhancing the conservation of a place or a species. But unfortunately, on the other hand, you know, you also see the increased pressures because of sacredness. And in that case, what we're trying to do and what we've been trying to do yesterday during our event is, you know, hold hands with spiritual leaders to ensure that, you know, they can spread the word of conservation. You know, they are often the people with much more influence than government. You know, so this is what we're trying to achieve.